Let's keep reading Dr. Critchlore's School for Minions. We are up to chapter 9, I think. Here we go. You've just been raised from the dead. Now what? Introductory class for zombies, mummies, and skeletons, taught by Professor Vodom. I was going to have to compete against 26 awesome classmates to get into the junior henchman training program. This was bad, which got me thinking. I'd already had 3 bad things: the wrong dorm assignment, the epic minion fail video, and the embarrassing zombies. If I had another bad thing, that meant I was cursed. But maybe epic minion fail didn't count because it wasn't really bad for me directly, it was bad for the school. So on my list of bad things, I replaced epic minion fail with not in junior henchman training program yet. And I was still at 3 bad things. Not cursed. I had study hall for 3rd period, which meant I was supposed to report to the library. Uncle Ludwig made us sign in, but then he pretty much ignored us, so we were free to leave, which was what he wanted. Once, while reshelving books, I'd asked him what he was researching, but he wouldn't tell me. It had to be something important because he focused every waking minute on it. I could have finished reshelving, but something was bothering me. I needed to figure out what was wrong with the zombies. Why did I have to repeat myself so many times before they obeyed? I didn't stand a chance in the junior henchman training program if I couldn't keep those zombies under control. I had a nagging feeling the zombies were defective, and that made me think about the ogre men from the video. Could something be causing our minions to fail? Critchlore's reputation couldn't take any more defective minions. I really hoped I was wrong. Necromancers are experts at dead stuff, so I headed to their building, which was out by the cemetery. To get there, I had to pass through the memorial courtyard, one of my favourite places on campus. The courtyard was a grassy pitch sprinkled with stone, statues and benches, and shaded by a variety of trees. A curving wall of polished granite called the Wall of Heroes separated the courtyard from the cemetery. It was about 50 metres long. The Critchlore family had trained a lot of heroes. Normally, it was a peaceful place, but as I approached, I kept hearing the shrill sound of a whistle and a lady screaming. I ran into the courtyard and saw Professor Zaida standing on a stump trying to teach her literature class. We took literature because most evil overlords enjoy a good bedtime story. Who doesn't? Professor Zaida, who is a little person, often teaches her class outside. She can really make stories come alive, and I mean that literally. She does this thing with animated clay that's amazing. She's one of the most popular teachers in the school. Tweet, Zombie 7, sit back down, she commanded. Tim, the arachno-human, was her junior henchman assistant, but he was taking a nap in a web he'd spun in the oak tree. It looked like I wouldn't have to worry about beating Tim into the junior henchman class. He'd already given up. When Zombie 7 sat down, Professor Zaida continued reading the creation story, Jolki and the First Monsters. I love this story. Jolki, the god of transmutable species, was hungry and tired after having spent the day creating the fire-bellied toad. He asked 3 women to bring him food. Intelligent, brave LaRue brought him a steak cooked to perfection with a side of mashed potato and asparagus. Jolki was pleased, and he rewarded her by giving her the power to turn into a wolf. The second woman, graceful and observant Eglenta, prepared a hearty chicken stew with vegetables from her garden. It was delicious. Jolki rewarded her with the ability to turn into an eagle. The third woman was the pretty but dim-witted Marvis. Jolki knew that cooking was beyond her ability, so he asked her to bring him some oysters. Since the ocean was just a straight walk down the road, and there was a woman there who could give her the oysters, it was an easy job. Unfortunately, Mavis got lost, fell into the ocean, and unwittingly insulted the oyster woman. Eventually, she got the oysters, but on the way back she grew hungry and ate half of them. At last, she returned to Jolki and gave him his meal. Jolki was not pleased. "You bring me half a meal," he raged, "so I will make you half a fish." And thus, the first mermaid was created from a very stupid girl. The zombies weren't listening. Zombie 7 sat, but then zombies 4 and 11 got up. They all had numbers on their backs like a sports uniform. Tweet, tweet, tweet. I wanted to help, but I didn't have time. I waved at Pismo, who I noticed was chewing gum. Where'd he get the gum? Uh-oh, I checked my pocket. My exploding gum was gone. Pismo rocked with silent laughter. Then he plucked the gum out of his mouth. I shook my head at him. He smiled wider and wiggled his eyebrows. I shook my head more vigorously. He tossed the gum over his shoulder. I winced. It exploded behind his back. Hey, ouch! Pismo cried. Professor Zaida stopped whistling and called the students together. He did it, Pismo said, pointing at me. That kid over there, he threw something at me and it exploded. Professor Zaida frowned at me. My mouth hung open in shock. I frowned hard at Pismo, who fell back, holding his stomach as he rolled on the grass with more silent laughter. When Professor Zaida turned around to see if he's okay, his fake laughs turned into moans. I think I need to see the nurse, he said. That's fine. Do you know how to find her? Yes, Professor Zaida. Ow! Pismo took off, showing absolutely no signs of injury. He didn't run for the infirmary, which was located back by the castle. He sprinted in the opposite direction, the direction I was heading, towards the necromancy building. I took off after him. I was going to pound that little twerp, but Professor Zaida's whistle stopped me cold. Tweet! Run, Higgins! I turned around. As if I'm not having enough trouble, I was supposed to have a class of ogre men. They love that story, but no, I'm stuck with uncontrollable zombies. It is not the day to play pranks. It wasn't me, Professor Zaida. Enough! She held up a hand to stop me from talking. You will report to detention after school. Yes, Professor Zaida, I said. Oh, man, I've never gotten detention. Stupid Pismo. I kicked a rock and continued on my way, now with a sore toe. Professor Vodum sat at his desk beneath a wall covered with diplomas, newspaper clippings, and photographs of him with famous people who looked bored. His wall seemed to be saying, "Look at this man, he's important." I wondered how long he would last in necromancy. He'd started at the school teaching weather control, but Dr. Critchlore had cancelled the class when a freak lightning storm set fire to the stables. Professor Vodum bounced around a bit after that, teaching stealth techniques. His students were caught sneaking into the Evil Overlord Council building. Hand-to-paw battle, the paws always won, and poetry. Only one person signed up for the class, Frida the ogre. He would have been fired, but he was married to Dr. Critchlore's cousin and a major stockholder of the school. What do you want? He said when he noticed me standing in the doorway. What did I want? My brain always seemed to freeze when someone seemed angry with me. He sighed with annoyance. Can't you see I'm busy? Professor Vodum, I'm sorry for the interruption. My hand grasped on my medallion without me telling it to. I was working with the first-year zombies, and they weren't responding to my commands, so I gave them some mind control potion and... Good grief, he said. Let me get the file. He got up and opened the cabinet along the wall. Like Dr. Critchlore, he was tall, but where Dr. Critchlore was slim and precise in everything, from his perfectly trimmed goatee to his spotless shoes, Professor Vodum was kind of a slob. His greasy brown hair lay flat on his head, and he wore a white lab coat covered with spills. I hoped they were food. He fingered the tops of the files, muttering, ghosts, mummies, skeletons, vampires, wraiths. There it is. He threw up his hands and slammed the file. Where is it? He threw up his hands and slammed the file cabinet. Where is it? That last part sounded a bit whiny for a grown-up, which made me feel very uncomfortable, like he was about to blame me for our missing file. It got worse when he called for the secretary. Marsha, he said, the R changing pitch as it rolled out of his mouth in search of its target. Where's the zombie file? He threw up his hands again. I can never find anything when I need it. Marsha came in and walked straight to the professor's desk. It's right here, Professor, she said, pointing to the stack of files next to his computer. Well, why didn't you file it away? He whined. I'm sorry, I thought you were using it. She reached for it, but he swooped it up. I am now, he said. You're dismissed. I bet it took a lot of self-control for Marsha not to roll her eyes. I was impressed. I smiled at her, and she winked back. Professor, I said, when you raise the dead, how do you get them to respond to your commands? Professor Vodum looked at me suspiciously. I'm afraid that's a professional secret, he said. I share that only with my honours students, 7th years. Rats. He looked at me, tilted his head sideways a bit, and then added, I guess I can tell you it takes a bit of chanting, a special cocktail of potions, if you will, and it has to take place during the right phase of the moon. That didn't really help me. I raised these zombies myself, he said, opening the file. Even added a scent adapter so they won't attack anyone here at school. Cook puts a little something in our food and we're safe from zombies. It's brilliant, really. Didn't Dr. Frankenhammer invent that? We'd had zombies for years and never had a problem with them attacking the humans at school. I suppose if you want to be picky, he invented the serum, but I administered it, so... But they went after Miss Merrybench. She wears too much perfume, Professor Vadom said, closing the file and dropping it on his desk. I've warned her many times. Where are my zombies now? With Professor Zeta, but haven't they been here? I asked. I sent them to the necromancer after first period. Dr. Critchlore has just hired 3 more necromancers. There are 5 on staff now, he said. I shared his office with 2 others. The other 2 have offices on the other side of the cemetery next to the lake. He looked out the window and pouted. I should have gotten the office by the lake. But if you raise them, why wouldn't they return to you? I asked. He looked hurt. Yes, why wouldn't they? Why don't my minions ever return to me? His voice rose higher with each word. It's so unfair. Gragley's undead returned to him. They even got him a card for his birthday. Why can't mine? I slowly backed out of the room. I had my answer. There was nothing wrong with the zombies. They just only understood wine. This was great news. No epidemic of defective minions. Plus, I could tell Professor Zaida how to control the zombies, and she'd be so grateful she'd let me out of detention. Then I could show Coach Foley, and my junior henchman status would soar. Goodness, look at the time, Professor Vodham said. I've called a meeting with the necromancers to inform them of my seniority here. Marsha!